From deep within the Australian bush, some 40 years ago, came a call of the wild that was to reverberate around the world and alter the course of an entire nation's history.
Skippy was my favourite. He always saved the day.
Good on you, Skip!
Every night after school, 2 Vegemite sandwiches and Skippy on the TV.
Go home, Skippy! Get Dad!
The most intelligent Australian I think I've ever met.
Skippy? Hold on, Skip, I'm on my way back.
Oh, it was good. Educating for the kids.
She's not just a kangaroo, she's a champion.
91 episodes sold in 128 countries, watched by over 300 million viewers a week. This is the remarkable story of how a crime-fighting marsupial became a superstar and helped establish an Australian identity that was embraced the world over. The land down under had arrived, courtesy of a kangaroo. What's that, Skip? You don't like to talk about it? But for us, you'll make an exception. Good on you, Skip. On the 16th of September 1956, something new and revolutionary arrived in Australia.
Good evening and welcome to television.
Television presented the conservative suburban country with a window onto the rest of the world.
You dream boats, you lovable dream boats.
But the view was mainly of America, as US programs flooded the airwaves. Australian producers could not get a look in. So the shrewd ones targeted the American market. A pioneering Australian feature filmmaker called Lee Robinson headed to Hollywood on a research mission.
300 feet down there, you'll never make it.
There he discovered the popular children's series Flipper.
Dad, Flipper could find that box.
Flipper.
Flipper featured a widowed Marine Park ranger and his 2 sons, who befriend a very clever dolphin.
It's a bigger box, and it's on the bottom.
Robinson came back from the States with a feeling that the international market had space for another kids' TV show, perhaps with a strong Australian flavour. But what could it be? At his local pub, Robinson threw some ideas around.
What kind of star we're going to have? Leave that to me.
And he soon hit upon the answer.
I think Lee had a certain genius. He understood marketing. He knew that the kangaroo was an icon. He knew that it was appealing. The head of a kangaroo is very appealing. So the idea that you put it in a family situation instead of the family dog was the brilliant marketing idea.
Well, I think Lee Robinson's a hero in the Australian film industry. He was an entrepreneur, he was highly creative, he was a great raconteur, which is why people would walk over hot coals for him.
Robinson and filmmaker friend Dennis Hill joined forces with actor-producer John McCallum, forming a company called Fauna Productions.
Did you get a budget estimate on the pilot, mate?
Together they made the risky decision to finance a first pilot episode themselves.
We had designed a series that we said we won't even bother to try and sell in Australia. I thought it would be so Australian and so laden with the sort of elements that we'd always looked in the feature pictures to have there as our selling factors for overseas buyers, that the Australians would give it the big thumbs down.
The big question was how to film an entire series based on a kangaroo.
He's a kangaroo handler, that's what he does.
In a North Sydney pub, Lee Robinson and Jill Robb met Scotty Denham and his son, Australia's leading animal trainers.
The 3 of them got on like a house on fire and they were all chatting each other up and it'll be fine, no worries, mate, we can get any number of kangaroos and no, they're easy to train and don't worry about it. I'm hanging back in the distance thinking, are we really going to set a series around a wild animal? And I couldn't help looking at his waistline, which kept moving. And he could see me looking at the end of he opened his shirt. He had a big python wrapped around his waist. And I remember thinking, this is going to be one hell of a ride.
Now we've got the number one question. What are we going to call it?
Now the Kangaroo star needed a name.
Well, come on. What do you got? Chuck it out.
Many names were considered.
Jumpy.
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 Hoppy.
Hoppy. Hoppy sounds like Kangaroo.
Springy.
Springy. Yeah, it's not fun enough. Need something kid-like, you know? Like
They were all rejected before finally they agreed.
Hang on. Skippy.
The star of the show was to be called Skippy.
Skippy, the bush kangaroo!
Welcome to the magic of music.
But before they cast a single actor or kangaroo, they needed a theme tune. This job went to Eric Jupp, an established composer with his own TV series.
He said he had to think, well, it's a children's program with animals, a young boy. It has to be simple and yet memorable. One day he was at a party with the fauna people and they asked him, well, Eric, how are you going? Have you got anything together for us? So he played what he'd put together and they loved it from the beginning.
As soon as we heard it, we knew, that's it, you know, that the children would, it's very recognisable.
It was simple, it was bouncy, and of course, da-da-da-da. Da-dum.
Skippy, the bush kangaroo. Skippy, 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 never true.
With the name and the music now in place, it was time to push on and make the pilot episode.
Mark. 95, take one. Action.
Hi, mister.
Alongside Skippy, the show featured a young boy called Sonny Hammond, a role destined to change the life of whoever got the part. It went to 9-year-old South Sydney boy Gary Pankhurst.
I think Sonny was very similar to myself. He was sort of outdoor, loving, outgoing, liked getting into mischief, was game to try anything once type thing, and I think I naturally just fitted into the role and I suppose did look quintessentially Australian by the very fact that I was comfortable in my environment.
Skippy! Skippy! Go home, Skippy! Get Dad! Hurry!
Yes, I'll wait for them here.
The other main role went to seasoned actor Ed Devereaux, who played Sonny's father, Head Ranger Matt Hammond.
That explosion we heard, it was a jet plane. The Air Force think the pilot parachuted into the park.
Are you coming with me?
No, you go with him, Mark. I'll go down and work along the river.
Let's get again, Mark.
Young theatre actor Tony Bonner was cast as the spunky flight ranger Jerry King.
Tony Bonner. Oh, what a legend. The pilot.
Yes.
Everyone fell for him.
Oh, he could propel my propellers.
Great to see you.
The character interests me because he was a helicopter ranger and I hadn't played that kind of character before. So the personal side of it interested me. I have to be honest, the family, fuzzy, sweet and soft aspect of the show was not my primary interest.
He's in trouble. His car's broken down. He can't get to the show. Is that it, Skip? Come on, Skip. We haven't much time.
Sonny's older brother, Mark Hammond, was played by 18-year-old Ken James.
I was prepared to do anything, and my own stunts. I remember coming back to Fauna Productions back in Sydney one day after a long day on the set, and the editor greeting me at the door saying, "You are crazy. You are mad." I said, what have I done? He said, I just seen the rushes of you jumping out of a helicopter into the water where sharks are and being pulled through the water by a jet boat. I said, yeah, but also our director said, if you do your own stunt, I'll do a close-up.
The pilot episode was hilarious, traumatic, terrifying, exhausting, you name it. I remember thinking, Christ, if every episode's going to be like this, I'm going to be worn out.
Well, Mr. Hammond, I hardly know which one of you to thank first.
Well, we're pleased to help out. The pilot's safe and he's going to be all right. That's the main thing.
You're a lucky man, Mr. Hammond, to have two such fine boys.
The pilot episode came to the first of many happy endings. But the series had yet to get off the ground. The producers needed a backer with deep pockets. Or perhaps a packer with deep pockets.
I don't think the Australians care whether they watch Australian programs or whether they watch Turkish, Egyptian, African. What they want is something that amuses them. Now,
media mogul Frank Packer, owner of Australia's first commercial TV station, TCN9, was one of the only people in the country who had the clout to do something with the Skippy pilot.
I knew Frank fairly well. We used to play golf now and then. And I liked Frank. He was no brigand, of course, but he had a good... he was a jovial fellow, but a very, very keen businessman. And he said, why don't you bring a copy of the pilot over and let's have a look at it.
The three directors of the company, Bob Austin, John McCallum and myself were there. And Frank is looking at the pilot and the sound went off. And I said to Frank, Mr. Packer, can we stop it and I'll get the sound fixed? He said, no, it's all right. He said, I can see what's happening. So it went on for about 3 or 4 minutes with no sound. And then it got right again, and it went for about another 5 or 6 minutes, and then the picture went out. And it happened to go out while dialogue was going on, and I said, well, we stop it and fix it. No, he said, I can hear what's going on. And he really only saw about half the picture, or heard half the picture.
At the end, he turned around and he said, I like it. I'll take as many as you make. How much you want for it? So I told him, I thought of a figure, and he said, all right. It was a handshake, no signature at all. And he said, none of this option business. I'll pay an initial fee and that's it. Well, now, he didn't know, and I didn't know, that he'd played Skippy for 25 years, which he did.
Mark. Action. I don't care who gave you permission, Doctor. There'll be no cages erected in this park.
You attend to your
It was May 1967, and Lee Robinson finally got Skippy the Bush Kangaroo into full production.
We started off planning it as a children's film, but the Americans were the first ones that said, stop thinking in terms of children's film. This is prime time entertainment.
Quick, Sonny.
It was set in the fictional Waratah Park, a beautiful piece of bushland 35 kilometres north of Sydney.
Nice bit of soft...
Did you know I got lost on the way in? I took the wrong turn.
For the first time in 40 years, 5 members of the original crew are revisiting the set to reflect on the peculiar challenges of working with a marsupial star.
Oh, there she is. She must be 45 years of age now. I wonder if she'd remember us.
Oh, now there's the grandson.
Look, this is the grandchild, no doubt, over here. Camera right, over there. That's got to be a grandchild of Skippy. Do you remember that?
That was always the way. I had this image of this kangaroo, lone kangaroo, just sitting out there with nothing behind it at West Head. And all you could see was this clear, nice clear frame and one room. And it was going, look this way, look that way, look this way. Ears were going, you know. And everybody said, isn't that beautiful? And you pull back and then suddenly you see there's 29 people standing around it with catering tins they got from the caterers, banging, making noises, trying to get the animal to look this way, look that way, you know.
What's that, Skip? Those bloody tins really did your head in. You think you might have a mild case of post-traumatic stress disorder? While Flipper had been able to play on the reputation of dolphins as intelligent animals, until Skippy bounced into view, kangaroos did not enjoy such a reputation.
On the pilot, we knew nothing really about how they would behave. And we only had one roo, which has a brain the size of a pea, you know. They're dumb.
Very dumb. Dumber than sheep.
Yeah.
They are dumber than sheep.
Dumber than sheep, yeah.
Dumber than sheep.
I don't think kangaroos are the cleverest animals, no. As I said, conditioning is a big thing. And yeah, I'd imagine being on the set of Skippy would have been one big effort. I've been working with kangaroos for about 8 years now. Just living with these guys day to day, it's hard enough trying to, you know, keep them in their own pen and look after them, let alone trying to make them do stuff for cameras.
Scotty Denham, the animal handler, was in fact originally a dog trainer.
And he told me very early on in the piece, of course, you can't train a kangaroo. So basically the kangaroo was put in its sack, its Hessian bag, where it was quite happily sat there, and brought out just for the shot. So it was still a bit dazed more often than not when it came out of the Hessian bag. And that's what we would do. It was still dazed enough not to know what was going on, so it wouldn't run off, because kangaroos will quite normally run off, you know, they'll just go for their life.
Skippy's unbridled inclination to bolt for the bush was the source of one of the biggest secrets of the production.
Skippy would be like different colours. 1 minute it was brown and next minute it was a little bit silver. I know my kangaroo.
We had to have about 10 Skippies, so that we kept that a secret.
There were 9 Skippies because the star, Skippy, had a lot of stand-ins.
There was always about 14 Skippies at any point in time up at the little zoo thing at the top of Waratah Park.
And 1 minute there'd be the kangaroo would be anorexic, and then the next minute the kangaroo would be plump.
We'd lose them quite a lot. Generally what would happen if you had a running shot, you'd bring one of the extras in, you might say, the extra Skippies, and they would then go for a race, and we'd all be chasing them eventually.
What's that, Skip? The cast and crew couldn't really keep up with you? Because you were a method actor. With 39 episodes to make for the first series, Lee Robinson set out the Skippy philosophy in a writer's Bible.
The first point was Skippy is not a pet and it can come and go as it pleases. That was the first concept.
The parents left it on the bank about half a mile.
Another concept was that policemen will always be our friend.
Well, the sooner we get started, the better.
A third vital point I remember was that mateship must always predominate as against authority.
You know, Dad, even if they are crooks, having good mates is very, very important.
And the key to it was that the little boy had all this wonderful country to roam about in, and the whole concept was always to have the feeling that he was free to roam the country, knew the animals and so on. Freedom and the wildlife element were part of it.
Come on, Skippy!
Skippy is the intermediary, as it were, the guide to the natural environment by becoming something that is a native animal and on our side at the same time. In some ways, Skippy does represent the return of the lost child. You know, so that the bush is now giving something back to the settler, and perhaps for the first time.
But not everyone was sold on the idea for the show straight away.
Skippy!
Even some of the writers had their doubts.
Skippy!
When I first heard that the star was a kangaroo, I thought it was a bit silly. But because I didn't go for flippers and talking horses and all of those things that were on television. But kangaroos then were considered to be pests, and I always thought that was terrible. So I just thought, oh well, the kids will go for this, and it'll make them think twice about their native animals. And whatever Skippy did after that was okay by me.
You won't last long, Mr. Koala, if you go walking around on the road.
One of the things that really set Skippy apart from other marsupial actors was her no-nonsense straight-talking.
That got rid of him, Skip. What did you say? That sounds pretty strong language, Skip. Better not let Dad hear you talking like that. Come on, I'll race you back.
One of the first things I remember doing in the sound department in those days was getting Dennis Hill, the producer, into the studio to a microphone to sort of show us how do you make the Skippy sounds.
This is an original recording of Skippy Talk by Dennis Hill. Take one.
Gotta leave myself up. Geez, I'm dry. Bloody whiskey.
I don't think we used those. We had those too.
I've never heard a kangaroo go. I've heard a lot of tourists.
Where'd you find it, Skip?
Skippy's unique conversational ability became her trademark and vital to many a story.
Hasn't got anything to do with the school teachers, has it, Skip? Did they kill it?
It was one thing writing a script with a talking kangaroo, but quite another to film it as if it was speaking. The crew had to be inventive.
Rubber bands?
Rubber bands. I wasn't going to mention that, but we'd put the that was our last resort.
Trying to get the rubber band off them,
Always give him a bit of
something to chew
on, and then go and then you'd start chewing.
As well as rubber bands, some tastier treats were also tried, like crushed up biscuits, pieces of chocolate, and even chewing gum.
The best thing ultimately was just the grass, but something tough that they'd have to chew on, not something nice and green and fresh off the ground, something that she'd have to work on. So she put it in her mouth, just a little bit, and she'd be there gnawing away, and that would be enough mouth movement to be convincing to put the old.
But I think she was better doing action stuff.
Yeah.
She preferred doing action when she didn't have dialogue.
Alongside her impressive oral ability, Skippy had another asset in her animal armoury: an astonishing manual dexterity.
They have elbows.
Now the drum kit, play the drum kit.
But they have elbows, and so what you had to do is you could get behind them, and if you only shot there, whoever was operating could go like that.
Yeah, that was the live room.
Yeah, well, live room.
Live room.
Live room.
And the Noel will be, somebody would be holding the real arms back like that, and you'd have the other arms like that.
Or you could use the live room if it was a docile one, and just get up under the elbow they have. As long as the camera kept framing from there down, as long as you could get your hands and just move the elbow, and they'd be going like that over the key.
They were very successful at playing the piano.
Yes.
They were very successful at handling the controls of a helicopter.
You can see they're pretty much all nails. There's not a lot more to them.
And making a phone call.
As far as untying knots and stuff like that, I've never seen it happen.
Speaking into the, and dialing a number on the phone.
And that's about all their calls are good for. The old the scratching, that's about it.
They made the series. That's what we had. And we had people dedicated, enjoying doing it. We had a lot of fun doing it.
I suspended disbelief until someone had a paw on a stick.
So isn't that disappointing? That takes all the magic away.
You know, like as a back scratcher.
So there was definitely an episode where he operated the radio.
Amazing kangaroo that could do everything, and I believed in him.
What's that, Skip? You fed up with being called a he? You were always flashing your pouch.
God, I always thought it was a he.
Had a pouch.
She had a pouch.
No.
Did they not all have pouches?
Oh, she did actually, yes, she did. Skippy will always be man in my eyes. But I didn't think about those things when I was a kid, yeah.
It is only females that have pouch, or one very odd male, yes.
Skippy was a woman, I could tell. I had a little pouch. And if Sonny had a mobile phone, that's where it'd be.
Well, come on, let's humour the little lady.
Except for Skippy, the series had an almost wholly male cast.
I guess you must be Mr. Hammond. All right, fellas, I didn't hear the whistle blow.
Now, about the job.
In Australia, the rugged outdoors was seen as a place for men.
The girl's got some kind of examination coming up and they don't want her to miss it.
It wasn't until episode 9 that the producers decided to experiment.
She's going to live here.
What?
Oh, no.
A girl here?
Into this testosterone-rich environment arrived pretty blonde schoolgirl Clancy Merrick.
Your father must be pleased about getting that job.
Yes, it means a lot to him.
My father worked for the BBC in London, and then he applied for the job as head of drama for the ABC and got it. So we were all, I was 15, my sister 13, taken to Australia with very bad grace. Didn't want to go with my friends. I thought, You want to go to Australia? Why would we want to go to Australia? We're very happy here, so we didn't want to go. We just sulked all the way on the ship.
I'm not welcome and I'm not wanted. I've known that ever since I came here.
It's only because you're a girl, Clancy. If you weren't a girl, it'd be different.
Well, I can't help being a girl.
Well, Clancy was just, well, to me, was just an ordinary, like me really, an ordinary girl who come out to live in this strange and wonderful place in the middle of nowhere.
Seeing Clancy out there in nature was just my dream.
I do remember Clancy, she was a babe.
Clancy, she was the epitome of the girl next door.
Rather plump girl with plaits, I think.
Skippy was pretty good with the brain surgery and saving us from the nuclear bomb, but I think Clancy did it for me most. Yeah.
Refined lady of means seeks companionship of quiet, educated gent.
Not only was Clancy a girl, but she also spoke in a clipped English accent.
View Matt means she wants to find a husband.
It was completely fine then, because I don't think the Australian accent, apart from real ockers out in the country, was as pronounced. I think everyone then wanted to sound as though they were English. And it was still the days in Australia, of course, when women wore hats and gloves to go out to lunch. And it was also the time when Jean Shrimpton came and caused a huge fuss at the Melbourne Cup by wearing a miniskirt. And of course, in that moment, all the girls in Australia wore miniskirts.
What's all this?
The combination of Clancy, the boys, the helicopter, and Skippy, of course, hit the mark perfectly. In Australia, when the first episode went to air in February 1968, audiences loved it. For all sorts of reasons.
Hello, Matt Hammond speaking.
That telephone on the dashboard of the station wagon.
And what more could you want as a young Australian child?
And it's all I ever wanted when I grew up.
Because you'd run out into the bush looking for Skippy because he was there.
And where's Tony Bonner?
It was real to us.
Oh, yeah, he was a bit of a sponge. Mum! Surprisingly, Skippy caught on internationally before it did in Australia. In Britain, it first aired on ITV in the Midlands in the autumnal gloom of October 1967.
Where's its mother, Skip? Koalas don't leave their babies about.
I remember it from the UK as a child. It certainly didn't put me off living in Australia in any way.
I first watched it in the UK. It might have influenced me to come to Australia.
Yeah, well, that was my first calling. Yeah, Skippy. It was a good advert for Australia.
It was cold and grey in England and I just needed to find Skippy, so I came to live in Australia. I did love Skippy, but she wasn't an influence in me moving to Australia.
One expat Australian academic came upon Skippy by chance in a cold, wet Britain.
It was one of those dead moments, and I kicked on the television, and there was Skippy. And I watched it absolutely hypnotised, because it was very sunny, and there was a cobalt blue sky, grey vegetation, ruddy brown rocks, and that was what I was staring at, just staring at it, because I don't think I even realised how homesick I was until I saw those tree shapes. There were all kinds of things about it that were totally unbearable, but the landscape and the light.
Ironically, the natural filmic charm of the Australian bush was being recorded by English directors.
There was still a feeling, I think, we couldn't do it ourselves. We had to have English directors. Australians weren't good enough, or they weren't experienced enough, or something like that.
Talk to him, guys. Say hello, Skippy. That's it. Look as though you like him very much. That's it, good boy. Fine, enjoy. Take 4.
Somehow or other, the Englishness in them showed the Australianness in us, and so it often takes someone from another country to see the beauty of this country. And I think that, I remember Max Varnell used to want to do wide shots all the time, and we used to call him Vista Varnell. And the wider the shot, the happier he was to get that bushland in the sky and the red dirt and what have you.
While the leafy landscapes and bright light were familiar to most Australians, to foreigners they certainly weren't.
Tourists.
One of those who felt the culture shock was regular guest star Elke Neidhart.
I'm Dr. Steiner.
Alongside Clancy, she was the only recurring female character.
We've been expecting it.
My character of Dr. Anna Steiner obviously had to be very German. That wasn't so hard. And of someone being totally out of her depth, which also was very much true to the real me being in Australia.
She'll end up getting lost in the bush.
She carries a compass.
And she's lost for sure. The day I see a woman read a compass correctly, I'll marry her.
In Skippy, hapless females were always getting lost, getting it wrong, and even managing to shoot themselves.
What can I say? I can't say anything, but it's obviously awful.
It belonged to a past era. It was a 50s, 60s series, not a 60s, 70s series.
And for the women working at Waratah Park, these were rather unenlightened times.
The guys were really tough to the women. They put us down constantly and, you know, to toughen us. I think it was like, you know, you had to prove that you could take it. You had to grow a thick skin and I did.
The cameramen often amused themselves by surreptitiously filming the girls.
Women weren't allowed to wear, definitely not jeans, definitely not trousers. You had to wear a dress, you had to wear a skirt, and they could be mini skirts because that was the period of mini skirts. And so you were actually quite indecently dressed quite often, these absolutely minute mini skirts, myself included. But on Saturdays, you were allowed to wear slacks. Not jeans, not trousers, slacks.
There's this terrible thing, this poor, any girl on the set was continuity girl and me and makeup girls. They were always filming us. Oh, awful, riotous laughter.
Now I'm all set, gonna go out and get you by hook or crook.
The women may have had a tough time on the show, but the army of animals had it tougher.
Come on, oh, get out, everybody out, come on. You.
Remember the one where Sonny was sick, right? And all the animals, who wrote that bloody thing? It was in the room out here, in his bedroom there, right? And the emu, the goannas, the koala bears. Have you ever seen a koala bear go through a set of Venetian blinds?
You get back to bed, you're next. Oh, sleepy. Oh, please.
Remember Hector the emu? Oh, yeah. We used to get him up there in a wheelbarrow.
He was an emu with attitude.
And we used to have to give him a drink before he'd come on set.
But he used to stand there like he was so drunk and he'd go, oh no, you'd see the look on his face. But he would stay where he was put.
But not without whiskey. He had to have at least a double scotch, didn't he? At least. And that'd wear off. You know, it was all right for rehearsals. And then when we get to the real takes, we had to give Hector another drink.
The things that were dangerous were the wombats. They're ferociously bad-tempered, so you had to be really careful. I remember one scene when I had a baby possum on one shoulder and a baby koala or wombat on the other, and apart from that, they were terrified of the lights. They were hanging onto my plaits, and then they peed all over me, and we're in the middle of the... and I made a huge fuss. They peed on me, and they said, oh, just dry. I didn't have any spare clothes, just dry off in front of a lamp, you'll be all right, squirt a bit of water. I stank. Unbelievable. And also got lice from them, because they all had lice. And so I remember storming into to the John McCallum's office and going, look, and going like this and shaking all these lice out of my head onto his desk. He went, calm down. And the next day we went on the set and all the animals were white with louse powder.
On a 1 to 10 scale of, difficult shooting, I always use the episode of Skippy with the hot air balloon, right? I say when you're dealing with, hot air balloons, animals and kids, so I always use that from then on as like, how difficult is it? Has it got a hot air balloon? Has it got a kangaroo in it? Has it got a kid in it? Or has it got a speedboat? It's not that hard.
What's that, Skip? It was bloody hard. But you were young and fresh back then and always bounced back.
Jump! Here we go, Skip!
For the crew, it was not only children and animals they had to deal with, but also the extreme heat.
It used to be so hot in here. Remember how hot it was in here? I remember, you're operating and looking at, what the hell is... And there was the boom swinger dripping perspiration down onto you. You go, yuck, gotta stop it.
God, he had a terrible time this night, because those days they had to have booms, with the mics and filming in the house. This poor guy up a ladder, I remember one day, temperatures of 40, 45 or something, and he suddenly fainted. I mean, it was extraordinarily hot. Not all the time, because in the winter, of course, it was all right, but in the middle of the summer, it was... And there was one time, remember, where there were bushfires all around us. And it was so bad, the bushfires, that they said, oh, well, we better go inside then, because we can't film outside, rather than leave the area, which would be the sensible thing to do, because literally the sky went black, so we went and did interiors.
There's your bushfire down in there. Can you imagine having that today? Whose permission did we get to light the bushfire? Yes. No one's.
Didn't it nearly get out of hand?
Get round the other side of it, Clancy! Work back into the centre!
A star with such a burgeoning international reputation as Skippy easily attracted a stream of high-quality guest actors, and many a glittering career was launched at Waratah Park.
Gee, that was great, Mr.
My friends call me John.
Mr. Hammond. Yes, I see you are.
As I always say, a boy's best friend is his kangaroo. That's what I always say. Hello, darling.
She even attracted a genuine Hollywood superstar, Frank Thring.
You'd be Matt Hammond.
Skippy was becoming bigger than Ben-Hur.
Dr. Alexander Stark.
Frank Thring played the arch-villain Dr. Alexander Stark, and he was wonderful. He would sit there on the set and regale us with amazing stories of Hollywood, where I cut off Tony Curtis's arm, darling.
Come here, my little beauty.
He used to scare me because he was so big, because he was the one, you know, in Ben-Hur, he played Pontius Pilate, and he gave the thumbs down. And of course, the whole world hated him.
Do you remember what Frank Thring said one day? He said to the assistant director, there's something in a Hessian bag over there and it keeps on moving.
Scotty said, oh, that's Skippy.
He said, my God, if that's the star's dressing room, what's mine like?
And then he sauntered off with his cane down this sort of dirt bush track to the location. And Gary and I were killing ourselves laughing at that. And that story, I've heard it round and round and round. Everybody knows the story. It has a life of its own.
51, take 4.
Action. Allow me to introduce myself. Alfred Aloysius Mortimer.
Barry Crocker made a guest appearance as a magician of dubious motives.
But what are you doing in Waratah National Park?
A fair question.
I decided I'd make him very British because, you know, the Australians traditionally hate poms. You know, we don't really, but I mean, it's part of the game that we play.
I, Alfred the Great, shall make this young lady disappear.
So I thought I'd make him a little more hateful, being English. He's quite a nice chappie, really, just that he was a thief, a shyster.
Aloysius! No! Elio! Ta-da-da!
What we tried to do was to give the world what Australia might be like. For Skippy, it was kangaroos jumped down the main street and you could pet a koala on every corner, and it was like a giant bush town. The city was hardly ever mentioned.
Skippy was the first series internationally to put Australian characters and Australian settings on screen with confidence, in a way that rang bells with people around the world.
The confidence building of this we can do it, I think, was critical in many areas of the lives of people who worked on Skippy, not just in film and television, but in many other ways. Coming out of the thing where, you know, the cringe, it sort of broke the mould a bit.
It was kind of the beginning.
It was, it was.
Really. And that's why it was so important, because it was the beginning of putting our stories out to the world.
Of course I remember Skippy. We used to have it in Germany. We used to watch it.
Okay, I used to watch Skippy every Thursday because that's when school is off in France.
Oh, we used to love it. We used to love it. We used to watch it with a whole bunch of people.
And I thought it was American.
We thought it was in Africa because we didn't know about Australia.
I never imagined it could be Australian because I didn't even know Australia existed.
By the time the second series went into production in mid-1968, the formula of a heroic kangaroo, endless Aussie sunshine and simple stories with happy endings was working everywhere.
Tu dis ça parce que tu es une fille, Clancy. Si tu étais un garçon, ce serait différent. Désolé, mais ça, ce n'est pas de ma faute.
No te preocupes, papá. Sonny estará bien. Está con Skippy.
Skippy solo es un canguro. Tú eres su hermano.
Skippyが見つからない。多分怪我してるよ。
分かってる、ソニー。家に帰ろうとしてるんだ。
もうあちこち探したよ。
When it became a success in Japan and then
England and the Ireland, Scotland, Wales, and then took off in Europe, and enormous success in Holland and Germany and France and Malta.
I landed in Japan in this plane, and there were all these people at the airport. I remember thinking, wow, I must have been travelling with somebody really famous.
And all these journalists came out, and I presumed it was for all these major English actors I was with.
I'm sort of looking around, and it was for me. It was absolutely staggering.
And they kind of came through all these people to me.
We met with limousines and taken to meet the girl who did my voice as Clancy on Japanese television. And so I thought, wow, it was huge. Everywhere I went, I was recognised everywhere.
Well, almost everywhere. In Sweden, child psychologists deemed it dangerous for children to grow up believing that animals could talk. Children that were exposed to such perversion, they said, were likely to grow up as misty-eyed fools, fondly watching documentaries that celebrated such nonsense.
Sweden never bought Skippy. Norway did, Finland and other states in the Baltic. And I phoned up the leading television station and said, why? It's a success, but you turn down every time our agent suggests Skippy. They said, we don't want our children thinking that animals can do what they really can't. Well, there was a point of view. I said, what about cartoons? They do everything in cartoons. Oh, we said, that's different, but yours is a reality film.
Sonny has no child friend. Now, if I were a Swedish psychologist, I would say that's the significant part there. The child has no peer group interaction at all. He is always dealing with people older than he is, and I think that's what's really wrong.
In real life too, child star Gary Pankhurst was mostly in adult company.
During lunchtimes, the other crew and cast used to play poker for money, and I suppose because I was one of the cast members, they couldn't not let me play. But I used to join in and play with them, and I was quite good at it actually. And quite often there I'd be the major stake winner for the session, so that used to irk some people.
Popular worldwide and with a clear star of the show, Skippy was the perfect vehicle to pioneer a marketing campaign and cash in on merchandising, an entirely new concept in Australia. Skippy fans were able to actually collect Skippy items. Some still do.
Well, it all started with this plate. I remember having one when I was very young, and just sort of wanted that reconnection with the show. There was quite a lot of stuff done at the time, not just in Australia, but also overseas. There's books from Spain, books from Germany, France, jigsaw puzzles from Amsterdam, jigsaw puzzles from England, magic slate from America, cards from Germany, money boxes, ashtray, T-shirts, cups, talcum powder too, which I believe is from Avon. This I think is talcum powder.
What's that, Skip? You never made a cent out of those bloody plates. Oh, you wish you'd played Darth Vader instead. The merchandising helped build Skippy into a cult hero, and she and Sonny went on tour throughout Australia, making live appearances in every capital city. The freckle-faced kid and the kangaroo drew more people than the visits of the Queen Mother and US President Lyndon Johnson combined.
When you see the crowds of people who actually make an effort to come out and to meet you or to see you, maybe just a fleeting glimpse in the distance type thing. I said we used to sort of stop streets and cause traffic jams and that sort of thing, and that was quite amazing. I probably found the public adulation, I suppose, a little bit overwhelming. I didn't really think that my character sort of warranted, this sort of star treatment type thing that and people's reaction to you.
Come on, Skippy, you be the bush kangaroo.
Skippy, the bush kangaroo.
Often on a
Sunday night, we were all there watching. It was Skippy.
And I mean, it was an absolute scream.
And I really remember lining up.
So we lined up very happily.
I thought we were in order.
Jump off to bed.
The oldest to the youngest.
Dad would always make us do it too, because we were kind of a little bit older.
And I can remember hopping.
The end of 1969 saw the world premiere of Skippy and the Intruders, a feature-length movie. And on TV, Skippy was now being shown in 128 countries, translated into 25 languages and watched every week by a global audience of over 300 million. This huge audience gave the producers a loud voice when tackling more complex subjects, such as Aboriginal stories.
It's all right, Sonny. These people will never hurt you.
Would your son be humbled? Live with my people.
No.
Lee Robinson had absolute respect for Aboriginal people. He'd worked alongside them. He admired their affinity with the land. He respected them as people. He respected them as an ancient culture. It was part of Robinson's background. It was part of the way he thought. It was part of the holistic way that he thought about Australian society. So it doesn't surprise me that he would have had Aboriginal characters included in the Skippy storylines.
Force has many faces. You talk away my people with fine clothes, clever toys, with wonder. Do not speak to me of force.
I cannot deny what you say, old one. I can only promise you it will not be so with Moon.
In 1967, the same year as Lee Robinson was writing these scenes, a referendum was held in Australia. It finally gave Indigenous people the same citizenship rights as white Australians.
Lovely, Skippy.
As the series progressed, the need to constantly turn out scripts led to increasingly bizarre stories.
It's the scene. It's idiotic. No self-respecting actor should be asked to appear with animals or children.
One episode, called The Last Chance, appeared to be a self-parody, where a film crew making a feature in the park starring an ageing actor realised that the real star of the film should be, of course, Skippy.
What do you think of that, Skippy? You're going to be a film star. You'll be famous.
You can't take her out of the picture. She's a star. She must have her chance.
Oh, calm down, gentlemen. You'll both end up with ulcers.
We both already have ulcers, haven't we? But that is besides the point.
I don't think Ed Devereaux hid the fact that he was being upstaged by a kangaroo all the time. He used to make jokes about it, but it took me a long time to wake up to the fact that the jokes were really not jokes.
Have you laughing stock? Playing second fiddle to a kangaroo?
I think I understand your position.
Almost inevitably, the unexpected scale of success put pressure on the cast and crew. Lee Robinson was working long hours and expecting others to do the same.
To go into Lee's office on a Saturday afternoon and say to him, I've got a big date tonight and I'm going to be out of here at 5 o'clock. He'd just raise his eyebrows at you and say, I don't think that's going to be possible. I go, Lee, I've done a 70-hour week already. Talk to me later, I'm busy.
Long hours, remote locations and tough working conditions were taking their toll. Halfway through the third series, broadcasters had stockpiled many episodes and, for the time being, did not need more. And so, just as Skippy was being enjoyed by countless millions the world over, it increasingly looked like the end of production was nigh.
I think it had a use-by date built into its concept. And then when you add to the fact that the hero was a young boy, you know, middle-aged men or young men in their 20s can go on being young men in their 20s for longer than young boys can aged 9 or 10 or whatever Sonny was.
Well, I think when Skippy came to an end, I was very disappointed. I was quite upset about it because even though it was hard work, I enjoyed doing it, and I wasn't fully aware of the circumstances, but it seemed to have ended just all of a sudden. I can remember going to do the final day of shooting and that, and people were very emotional. The crew were all hugging each other and sort of, you know, teary and that sort of thing. And it was a difficult time when it did end, when the show finished.
In September 1969, after 91 episodes, production on the series finally came to an end. But it was not the end of Skippy. She was to live on for generations and made many cameo appearances over the following years.
Skippy, Skippy, Skippy the boy's kangaroo. All together now.
You can't shoot her. She's a national treasure, syndicated in 67 countries.
Don't worry, love. I'll let you have one of her paws for a bottle opener.
Right, got a gun!
Good one, Skippy.
Let's not concentrate on your opponent.
More recently, Skippy's psychotic cousin Skipper even got on a trendy contemporary show.
Skipper, Skipper the kangaroo.
I think you only make fun of something that people are going to know about, and go for it. I mean, I think it's fantastic. I don't mind it. I love it. I laugh at it.
I love Skippy.
Skippy has now even entered the vernacular.
In New Zealand, and I was studying, the very first Aussie friend I met called me a curry muncher, so I called him Skippy. So from then on, we call each other Skippy and Curry Muncher. Oh, I call like my white mate Skip. Yeah, it's just like if they're like real redneck type of thing. Yeah, so they always Skip. That's all.
There is no chance of putting Skippy to bed. You've only got to go to YouTube and find that Skippy is alive and well.
There'll always be room for fairly uncomplicated entertainment for people basically wanting to escape. And Skippy was escapism, and it offered that escapism to people around the world.
I'm extremely proud to have been involved in it. I've worked with young people and tell them I've worked on Skippy, and one woman said to me, "You are a legend." You know?
Well, funnily enough, it's probably taken me 30, 35 years to really come to grips with what Skippy meant and what my part in Skippy was all about. I used to try and avoid the Skippy subject while trying to live a normal life, but it's only in more recent years that I've realised what an impact it actually made, and the fact that the contribution to Australia's history and to the world's impression of Australia was such a large one that, I mean, quietly I feel very proud about it.
To me, it was a very lucky break.
A career at last. Memorable, happy and fun.
Positive, professional.
Iconic.
Historic television milestone.
Simple and wholesome.
A true bloody Australian.
1, 2, 3.
Hippity hop, she'll stop the traffic when she passes by. You'll stop and wish that you were where she's going. Hoppity hip, she'll skip into your heart. You'll wonder why the world is all a glimmer and a glowing. Cute as a koala and as busy as a bee, happy as a kookaburra laughing in a tree. Hippity hop, she'll stop traffic when she passes by. You'll stop and wish that you were where she's going. Hoppity hip, she'll skip into your heart. You'll wonder why the world is all a glimmer and a glowing. Cute as a koala and as busy as a bee, happy as a kookaburra laughing in a tree. Hippity hop, she's up the way she'll wave goodbye. That's when you'll want the whole wide world to know that you love Skippy, Skippy. Skippy the bush drummeroo. Skippy, 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 our friend ever true.
What's that, Skip? You're exhausted after all your heroics. Totally stuffed. Good on you, Skip.